Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Cinema Wave podcast. We are back for episode 5 of the new Star Wars show on Disney Plus, The Acolyte. I am one of your hosts. My name is Darian Scalamoni. I am joined, as always, by my Star Wars buddy, Mark Jacobino.
What's up, Darian? Hello, everyone.
Lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Lot to talk about. We kind of had that feeling coming off of episode 4 because of the way it ends. And we went in a little bit on like, why did you cut where you cut?
Mm-hmm.
There was some stuff online from some writers talking about why they did what they did. We don't need to necessarily get into that.
Fine.
However, what I do want to start with is on your podcast, the Mark of Balance podcast, you had the perfect title for your episode.
Oh, thank you.
To describe
you.
how I felt about this episode. And I feel like a lot of people felt. So please grace us with that. And then we can dive into the conversation on why that's so significant.
Lightsaber fights can't save the Acolyte. What did I name it?
I think it was lazy. I think it was lightsaber fights can't save lazy writing.
That's good. That's good that I can't remember my own episode.
That is the pure definition of what this episode is.
Yeah.
Right? Because there is, and a lot of people, I would say that majority of the people that I've been seeing in the online community feel similar about this episode. This is probably one of the better episodes, if not the best episode of the season so far, but the writing is still very poor. And a big weight of what makes this episode better than some of the other ones is that the fight choreography is really good.
Yeah.
But the problem is that because of where we're at with these characters in the story, now more than halfway through it,
mm-hmm.
we don't feel an emotional connection to basically anybody in this whole entire show.
Yeah.
So I wanted to just get your broad thoughts on the episode as a whole before we dive into the details of it.
Sure.
And why that's significant.
Yeah. Well, as I kind of said, like, action can't save a series. Some movies are based on just pure action. I mean, and that's fine. Like, if you like Star Wars for the action, for the lightsabers, for the explosions, the space battles, that's fine. But Star Wars as a brand, as a franchise, as a universe hasn't survived almost 50 years off of the lightsaber fights. I think everyone would agree that the original trilogy, the lightsaber fights are not the most visual spectacles that they were in the prequels. And the reason they were so great, why they were so gripping, was because of the characters and the emotion that was shared between the characters. The lightsaber fight between Luke and Darth Vader is my favorite lightsaber fight in Star Wars. And it's in the throne room. And you could definitely make the argument that it's not the most visually stunning or like the most well choreographed fight, but it's just the emotion that is, and everything that's at stake in that fight makes it feel so much more impactful. The prequels were able to kind of build on that and do the spectacle while also having really effective themes and character moments within those battles. With the Acolyte, yeah, we have really cool choreography here. I think a lot of people expected that going into the show because I think Leslie Headland's show Russian Doll was known for those kind of like hand-to-hand combat choreographed fight scenes. So that was something I was looking forward to in this show. And I think overall the fight choreography has been good. And I think this episode was the best. Even thinking back to like Ahsoka, where I thought like some of those fights were pretty good. Some of them were pretty bad. I thought this one overall was really cool. And it had the hand-to-hand combat. It had the lightsaber combat. So overall, like, the action's great. But like you said, I don't care about any of these characters or the conflict between these characters and the leaps and the jumps that this episode makes with character arcs where, Mae last week said, I'm done with this mission. This is stupid. Now she's back on that because now she's going with Soul at the end of this episode. Mm-hmm. And she's just doing these flip-flops, and it's just not compelling as a character if you don't understand their motivations. And she said she loves Osha, and then by the end of this episode, she leaves Osha in the middle of the forest. It's just like, it's not compelling writing. I know some people will say, well, it's a very difficult time for her, and that's why she's flip-flopping. It's like, no, that's not a compelling character arc. So I think a lot of issues just stem, again, from the bad character work between these characters. There's no real tension or conflict between these characters that we care about. And in the end, it just leads to a really flashy episode that doesn't really land other outside of just that. a flashy episode.
A lot I want to dive into on what you said, because I agree with all of it.
Yeah.
I want to start with the latter part of it,
Sure.
which is sort of how the writing has gone sort of in this like boomerang sort of back and forth, right?
Yeah.
A big part, the unfortunate thing is that because the show is labeled as a mystery series, people are going to say, oh, well, it's the mystery and it's trying to figure out what's going to happen next. And it's like, but there are things that are done well in mystery where it doesn't seem telegraphed. At the same time, you're not being confused by characters' motivations or their choices. And that is not what this show is.
Right.
Now, I haven't watched, we've both talked about this so many times now. So if you're watching us for the first time, we're going to say it again, but neither of us have seen Russian Doll.
No.
So I have no idea what the sensibility is behind Leslie Headland's vision for that show and how it may or may not correlate to her ambition and vision for the Acolyte. Because I know it's trippy. I know there are like, what I know about it is that it's a trippy show. It's one that kind of subverts your mind in a way. So I can see that she can have that sensibility. It can be done well because critically that show was beloved and it earned Natasha Lyonne multiple Emmy nominations. That's not what's coming across in this show. And I don't think that's a Star Wars problem. I think it's a writing problem. And to sort of tailspin into the first thing you said with what I just said, in terms of it being something like action in Star Wars, it's more than just Star Wars. It's just storytelling in general, right? Like there are certain things that are different that like, so for example, like The Raid is very action heavy, but the story is also so great that it kind of organically works its way into it and it makes you care more about people dying.
Yeah.
Right. Marvel does a really good job of kind of having, when they do it right, with the emotions of these characters and why the action supplements that. And that's why at the core, the thing that people came to the Marvel movies for, especially in the first three phases, was the characters and the story that was being told and the action. Like, again, people do remember the portal scene from Endgame, but there is so much lead up to that moment, including the fact that you are revisiting moments in time in the MCU to get you to this point to make it feel valuable. So with this show, when the only character that we both have been consistent on really caring about is Master Soul, and there's not even a major focus on his character in general, it's going to be very hard to make even diehard fans and casual fans care about these characters that are dying, because we get a lot of death in this episode, and we get a lot of death in general, but we also get deaths from major characters. I don't want to say that they're characters that we necessarily, again, we don't care about them because we haven't felt the need to care about them. The emotion is not there, and there's not enough driving their backstory and what we're learning about these characters to really care when they lose their life. And then on top of that, I think there's just major holes.
Oh, for sure.
In terms of one thing in particular that stood out to me, if you want to talk about this, is the spectrum of power in Star Wars, because it's a big deal for a lot of people. And it's not something as a casual fan, like, again, I don't notice necessarily like the power scale or the power spectrum all the time, right? Like one person's supposed to be more powerful than the other because all these things, right? But obviously, if you know Star Wars, a Padawan shouldn't necessarily be able to keep up with somebody that is a very powerful force, whether that be Sith or Jedi, right?
Yeah. And
one of the things that stood out to me in the episode, and then afterwards when I did some diving, was a fight scene in particular between a character that is being known as the Stranger, which is the Sith Lord, who we eventually get to reveal, Chimere, and Jackie.
Yeah.
And Jackie's a character that, despite us not maybe necessarily loving her character, there were moments at least within that character that made us appreciate Daphne Keen's performance, all these things.
For sure.
But Jackie is a Padawan.
Yeah.
And Jackie gets into this huge fight scene with Chimere, a fantastically choreographed scene.
Yeah.
Genuinely very, very well choreographed. However, Chimere has a big struggle with her, winds up killing her, and then a few minutes later is choking Osha and able to fight off Master Soul with one hand.
Right.
That's a problem. in my eyes. Maybe you feel differently.
Yeah, honestly, that's not something that really bothered me in this episode, to be completely honest. I think that Jackie, while she is a Padawan, we have seen Padawans go toe to toe with, Sith or, higher end dark side users. They lose in the end, but they do hold their own, at least for a little bit. And I think because she's surrounded by so many allies, like, she's able to maybe look a bit stronger because she doesn't have to hold out as long. I could see your point, but actually that didn't bother me too much.
Interesting.
Yeah. The power scale has never been like a thing for me in Star Wars. Like, when people do those things where it's like, who would win in a lightsaber battle, like that, I check out. Like, I don't care, because again, Return of the Jedi, like Luke beating Vader, Luke again, I don't think beats him because he's more powerful. He beats him because he believed his father was still in there.
Yeah.
And he won the more thematic battle, and I think that's what's important.
Well, but even
for me,
I'm gonna give you, but this is my point, right?
Yeah.
You can explain to me,
yeah,
why you have a belief, whether it has to do with legitimate power, or a mental ability, why someone could beat somebody.
Yeah,
we have no perspective
exactly
on why Jackie would even be in this situation, and at the same time, we also really don't have much perspective on Chimere. Like, we just don't. We can go into that, because that was the thing that was the big reveal that a lot of people saw coming. I would say 90% of people watching this show thought and kind of knew that Chimere was the person being known as the Stranger, according to the showrunner Leslie Headland.
Yeah. It was extremely heavy-handed in the writing, and I think one of the worst lines of dialogue in the show is when he grabs Mae and he says, "You really didn't know it was me?" And it makes Mae look like the most incompetent character, which I'm not saying she is shown to be, but she did kill 2 Jedi Masters. Like, we have to give her some credit. But just that line of her being shocked that it's him, like, in a mystery, you can't have your audience one step ahead of you. Like, that's a misfire on a mystery. If your audience is far ahead of the writing, that's not a good mystery. So I thought that was a really bad line, where I was like, did they really think they wrote like a interesting mystery to the point where Mae would be shocked at this?
Well, I think that there's a few different, and again, unfortunately, I can't think of a lot of the dialogue off the top of my head. Maybe you remember some of them more than I do.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of really poorly written scenes in this episode.
For sure. Yeah.
I mean, the show in general has been poorly written. I think that what stood out to me the most in this episode, though, in terms of the writing, was the dialogue. Yeah. Maybe it's because we're getting more dialogue and it's in between fights and things like that. I mean, again, this is minor, but when Yord is taking Osha back to the ship and she goes, "They're attracted to the light," and he goes, "What?" And it's like, you just found this out the episode before this.
Yeah.
Like, everyone in front of you. You saw it in front of you.
Yeah.
So did you just manage to forget?
Right.
Like, I don't understand, especially because based on what we know, this is all taking place within one day.
Well, right.
Because it cuts in the middle of the action for last episode.
Well, the dialogue is very much like repeating information the audience already knows. Like, Osha sees Yord get his leg cut, and then in that scene you're talking about, she says, "You're injured." We know that. We all know that. We all saw it happen. You saw it happen. You don't need to repeat that information. It's already been seen. And then, there's obviously, like, later on, Yord runs, like, fine. Like, he gets his leg cut, and he lays down. He's like, "Oh, I'm hurt." And then later on, he's like, fine. So they just kind of go, his leg's all right.
It's so crazy to me how lazy some of it seems.
So lazy.
And I'm not sure if you wanted to talk about your feelings in terms of that in response to maybe, I don't know. We've talked a little bit about how much care they've put into the High Republic, right?
The books, yeah.
The books.
For sure.
And there was a very big, intense and intentional rollout of these books and these novels, because they wanted to usher in this new era of Star Wars that could welcome fans in and they could use as a platform for storytelling.
Yeah.
And the Acolyte is their first show ever, right? Not even just in live action. It's their first show ever in
the High Republic.
In the High Republic, thank you. Had a brain fart there.
Sorry.
So that's, like, we talked about this a little bit last week, but in terms of how lazy they are with that, and the show was taken, 3 years to make? with $180 million budget. Where's your thought process in terms of and confidence in the show going forward? I know we don't have a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about it from the first episode, at least on my podcast, about how lacking in world building the show is done for the High Republic. I don't feel it makes you feel like you're in a new era of Star Wars. If you dropped anyone in here, you would probably think you're in the prequel era. I don't feel like there's been that regality that you talked about with the Jedi Order, with the respect that they have across the galaxy. It just feels like we're seeing more prequel Jedi, but they just use the High Republic as a marketing technique to get this show maybe more views. And as someone who, read the High Republic books, loves them, loves the time period and the world building of that time period, this show hasn't really done any world building to make it feel different. On the side of my confidence in the show going forward, this episode ends on one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen in a TV show like this, where Mae cuts her braids off and then runs up to Sol dressed as Osha, and Sol doesn't recognize that they've switched places. Not that a lightsaber would leave your hair singed or it would smell like burnt hair. Your hair would be perfectly cut after that. It's just extremely lazy to the point where it's like the writer sat in a room and said, well, we need Osha and Mae to switch places. Well, they have different hair. Oh, okay. Well, she has a lightsaber. We can do that. That would look pretty cool. Maybe symbolic. All right, let's do that. And it's just, I rolled my, I'm like, how can anyone watch this and think that was compelling? That was interesting.
Even beyond the literal,
yeah.
What's the word I'm looking for? Like the literal visual or the sense that Sol would have where he's noticing that something is different. The whole thing with his character is that he's known both of these girls from a young age.
Yeah.
And he has the sensibilities of these two girls. And a big part of what we saw in episode 3 is the flashback episode, right?
Yeah.
In episode 3 is he makes a choice.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't do that blindly. You would have to assume, maybe we're giving them too much fucking credit, but he would be making the choice based on who he thought would be able to help him with whatever his mission is.
Yeah.
As someone who's a Jedi, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he should be able to fucking differentiate between Osha and Mae.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen. Like, they have a very small moment where he looks at her like, and it's like it. And I'm like, again, it's feeling lazy. It's and it really feels like you're almost insulting the viewers.
That's what I said.
Not even as a Star Wars fan though. You're insulting just regular people that watch television. It's not that hard to pick up on that he should be able to know. If you know Star Wars and you know that he's a powerful person, a powerful Jedi that has these force capabilities, and you should be able to read people's fucking minds.
Yeah.
Then what is happening here?
Right.
And that's where it's really starting to bother me. And that whole sequence from as soon as we get the reveal of Chimere, which again, it was predictable. We get the cool, I will admit again, Jackie's death scene, it's a cool visual. It's cool to give him the reveal that way. But everybody, it didn't lead to anything because we all kind of had a feeling that it was going to be him anyway.
Yeah.
That whole second part of that episode, it just gets messy and it gets convoluted and people are running all over the place. And even in terms of the editing, it jumps back and forth.
Right.
In such weird times where you're like,
yeah,
why would they cut there? Like, why don't you leave it for a little bit more tension and then we'll go to the other characters?
Yeah, I mean, you could go down the list. The stranger, Chimere, is trying to kill Mae actively, but continually throughout that part of the episode, he's just holding her hostage for reasons. Because
Yeah.
And he gives out his villain plan because, if he wants to kill Mae, which he shows, he holds her with the lightsaber and then she runs away and then he tries to cut her head off and chases her, tries to kill her again. He's had opportunities to kill her. He could have just done it, but the story doesn't want to do that. The character should do that, but the story doesn't want to do that. You can go so many different directions with the laziness in the writing and execution. You can even talk about, sorry, we're jumping all over this episode, but there's so much to talk about.
Yeah.
We talked about last week the manipulative cliffhanger to get us to come back this week.
Yeah.
Last week, the episode ends. He pushes all the Jedi back. We open this week. Sol is 1,000 yards away. Jackie is in the forest randomly on another side. And we just open with the Acolyte or the Master fighting all the random Jedi.
The shitty Jedi that nobody knows their names,
right?
So we can get a bunch of cool shots of him
Yeah,
killing Jedi.
and then he gets Yord down, doesn't kill Yord. Felt very much like in Mando season 3, where all the guards have Mando down and Grogu busts in the IG-11 thing, and all the guards are like, "That's the biggest threat," and all of them run away from it. It's just like, oh my god. So that's the first like laziness of the framing of the fight, is just, we need to get a whole episode out of this. Let's just spread everyone out.
I think that's so, you know, and again, like you said, we are jumping all over the place, but that, the same way that maybe the power thing wasn't a thought process for you, that was not a thought process for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't even realize, it didn't come to my mind that the two most important Jedi within the episode, Sol and Jeki, are nowhere remotely close to where a cluster of other Jedi are. Didn't even cross my mind until you just said that.
They got you.
They got you. They literally got me.
They got you with the cut.
So ridiculous, man. Oh my god. But there's so many crazy things. We didn't even get to the fucking moths. Like, the moths carry away Chimere.
Yeah.
What the fuck? He's a Sith Lord, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you mean? What do you mean that these fucking bionic moths are carrying him away? And then even the scene where, like, when he eventually breaks away from these moths, it's like daylight.
Yeah.
It's like, it's way after the fact. And he just lands like, and I'm just like, oh my god,
time to strut off.
Yeah, it's just like, so I don't know, man. It's getting me really amped up, because there's so many manipulative filmmaking techniques that they're using to try to move the story forward and progress it in an organic way, and instead it's sticking like a sore thumb for people that have seen good television in this universe.
All right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just it's very difficult to sort of navigate.
I kind of want to get my specific Andor cred in, because we have to talk about Andor every time.
Always. Every episode.
You know, you see all the Jedi die. Obviously, these Jedi were all there to be cannon fodder, but taking a lesson from Andor, even the smallest characters had an impact. Like, the one shop owner's kid. The shop owner gets killed. The kid is the one who throws the bomb that starts the riot on Ferrix at the end.
Yeah.
That kid had maybe like 2-3 scenes in the entire show, but he literally is the spark that lights the actual fire on Ferrix and the rebellion on Ferrix. That's just one character, and Andor does that with every single character. No character is wasted. These Jedi here, they are literally just there to be killed, and it's just like so unfortunate that they don't take the time to even just give them like a line here or there, just something to make them feel a part of the story and not just background dressing.
But we should have saw that coming, because they kill off 3 Jedi that are substantial Jedi.
Yeah.
That get no dialogue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Between Kelnaka, Torben, and
them too. Yeah. You're right.
Like
right.
nothing.
You're
we
right.
get nothing from these characters.
Yeah.
And again, it's a very, like, I don't even understand how they have 3 episodes left. Like, to me, now they're about to go down a whole nother rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Like, we were building up to this thing, and it was building up to a mystery that everybody already was aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And do you want to talk about the end of the episode? Because I know you brought it up a little bit, where you were like, it was like one of the worst endings ever.
Yeah.
But like with Chimere and Osha, and we also have Mae now on the ship with Sol.
Yeah.
Like,
Sol just abandons his dead Padawan on the planet. Like, doesn't, again, a character moment that they could have had of him, you know, going up to Jeki's dead body and closing her eyes, going up to Yord's body. Nah, let's get to the ship.
Yeah, let's get out of here. You know, like, I have a weird feeling about you, but I should be listening to you now. Also weird.
So weird.
Oh
yeah,
my God.
I even said, again, this is supposed to be a mystery, but my prediction last week, I said, it feels like they're going to flip sides. Osha's going to end up with the Master and Mae's going to end up with Sol. Here we are. I don't know if they'll officially go down that rabbit hole of Osha actually turning, but I think that's what they can do with the last 3 episodes. I feel it would make sense. I'm assuming next week we go back to a flashback. We just had this very bombastic episode. I feel like they'll go back to the events of the Coven dying, and
yeah, because they at least reference it in the end with that meeting between Mae and Osha. How did you feel about that scene? between Mae and Osha, because that was one again where I think they really wanted the audience to feel something, and to me it didn't feel
Very uncreative in its filmmaking because it was just reaction shots, just back of character, back of character, back of character. Because we know it's Amanda Stenberg. They are doing both characters.
Yes.
I understand that. But we've seen in film and television that you can do the same actor talking to themselves in a scene in creative ways. And when you have this emotional moment between two characters where your suspension of disbelief is not there because you know it's just Amanda talking to a body double of herself, and they're just talking back and forth, there's no emotional weight because you don't see the characters actually sharing the scene.
Yeah.
And so that landed flat. They never had chemistry to start with. They didn't have chemistry when they were kids. They don't have it when they're adults. So this scene doesn't make me feel like, oh, the sisters are reunited. Yes, finally. Like, that doesn't land for me. I
agree with the filmmaking part of it too, because I know, like, so my theory was wrong. Your theory was right in terms of them swapping places. Woo. Shout out to you, point to Mark. But I had thought that they might have been going in like a Fight Club kind of direction, like having this where like maybe these two characters are the same person. You could have done a very creative way of filming it in that sense, and you could have done something visually which still could have had the audience not necessarily knowing.
Yeah.
Like, there were still people that were there were people that were thinking like me that potentially were like, I'm not really necessarily 100% sure if this is the same person or if they're two different people. And it's weird because, like, Soul also isn't giving us a lot of context in terms of which one is good and which one is bad. And he wants to say both, but he doesn't want to say either. Like, it's very confusing. Yeah. So you could have at least had some sort of mystery now going into episode 6. But now we don't really have much of a mystery at all. Like, we just know that they've swapped places. That is where we're at.
Yeah.
In terms of the story. And if you want to talk about that, but I do think
keep going.
Well, what I was going to say was what came out about what Leslie Headland said in this interview. So I'm going to reference an interview directly because I just read this literally right before we started recording. So Leslie Headland did a interview with Entertainment Weekly that I guess had to have been following episode 5.
Like, it was the cover for Manny Jacinto's character. Becoming the stranger.
Okay. So, she talks in particular about how there is more to be known about Chimere and the stranger, and it's possible that, well, it's definite that you're not going to get all the answers you want within this season. But there's more to explore in a potential season 2. And when I told you that, we both were like, this show's not getting a season 2. Like, we would both be in shock if that was happening. But so I'm just going to read the direct quotes, and then if you want to react to them, like, I mean, I know we read them before.
Yeah, I'll get my reaction face on.
He wants the freedom to be able to be who he is and wield his power the way he wants to, Headland said about the stranger. But he also wants some freedom on a second level, and that, I think, we'll get more into if we get a season 2. But once we knew he was going to kill Jecki and Yord, then it became about how are you going to execute this in a way that feels satisfying and believable once it does happen. Because it's Osha's story, you don't know much about the stranger's background, and you're not really going to learn much about it. But there are a bunch of things in episode 6 and episode 8 that are really big clues as to why he is the way he is and why his philosophy is the way that it is. And then in terms of her philosophy on the first and second seasons, she suggested that the series' story may nearly demand a second season because the full story won't yet be revealed, which is different than what her initial things were. So when you hear all of these things, what is your thought process? Because to me, it's another way of using manipulation. The other thing I just thought of, if she's saying episode 6, I do predict that episode 6 will be Chimere's flashback episode.
Okay, from his perspective.
That's what I think we can.
I agree. That's probably fine with Osha. Yeah. My reaction. It's very much the streaming era answer. It's we can no longer tell one season stories anymore in streaming. Shogun proved that. You know, Shogun was this incredible series that was touted as a limited series. It is a limited series. This is one of the best limited series of all time. And sure enough, it did great, and now there's a season 2 in the book. So
and season 3.
I didn't know they said season 3.
Yep,
that's crazy.
Seasons 2 and 3.
That's crazy. But I trust them more than this. So that just screams to me that Disney, with all their stuff, says, tell a story, but make sure we have enough to make a season 2. Okay? Like, I know you probably want to finish your story, but don't. Okay. So I think it's just the streaming era of things, unfortunately. She said before the show even aired, I remember when she did an interview with Star Wars Celebrations, she said, I'm telling an emotional, like, close out of a story in season one, which you said with Osha, like, that's the emotional end of the story in season one. What that means in season two, if it becomes like an anthology of the High Republic or the end of the High Republic, where it's not just Osha's story, it can then become Kamir's story. It could then become from all these different perspectives during the time period. I have no idea, but it's not compelling. It just seems like, and it's fine. We don't need to know everything about Kamir. Like, that's totally fine. Like, it's okay that he's a mysterious character. Not saying his motivations are like great, but they're Sith-like motivations. He wants freedom. He doesn't want to be, policed by the Jedi. Like, that's a very selfish Sith thing to do. Like, I don't need to know everything about every single character. So I think that's just streaming speak for Disney said, keep the door open.
Yeah.
And if they did give this show a season 2, I understand people are enjoying the show. That's fine. But that would be a middle finger to the Star Wars fandom if they made a season 2 out of a show that has been so unliked by so many Star Wars fans for the right reasons and for the wrong reasons. I understand there's a sect that is terrible. They have their reasons for being negative towards the show, but there is a large section of the fandom that is either not watching the show. My friends who are casual fans that watched all the other live action shows, watched 2 episodes of this and are like, I'm not interested. And then you have the Star Wars fans that love Star Wars and are like, this isn't good. So to greenlight a second season of this show and spend another $100 million, I don't see the quality being astronomically better. Like, that it goes from season 1 where it's terrible, the writing, the dialogue, everything. I don't see season 2 coming together and being like, wow, they really overhauled this.
Well, even from a business perspective, it doesn't really make sense.
No.
Like, it doesn't make sense why you would invest another $180 million into a show that is, I mean, again, I don't know what it's at critically. Like, I haven't checked Rotten Tomatoes.
The only reason I hate Rotten Tomatoes is because
it's an aggregate anyway, but
it's only for like if the critic gives a 60%, that goes towards the 100%.
Yes.
So a critic just has to give this a D minus, a 6 for it to get 100%. Like, I think that system is very flawed in the way it presents the information, because people will see like 86%. Oh wow, people are giving it an 86. No, 86% of the critics are saying it's a 6 out of 10.
Yeah. So the critic score is relatively high. It's 84.
That's crazy.
The average audience score, for reference, is 14%. So it is a 70% difference. But again, I agree with you. I don't think Rotten Tomatoes is the end all be all in terms of criticism.
Yeah.
And I agree with a lot of what you said. I think that some people are disliking the show for the wrong reasons.
For sure.
What we try to do on this show and in our criticism of the show is really criticize the filmmaking, like the writing and the directing and the acting and the story more than anything. And what this show has lacked so much of is what it was billed as. It's a mystery. Every mysterious thing that they have thrown at us so far, we've been able to predict one way or another.
Yeah.
Right? So maybe they shock us completely, but even so, like, the lead up to bringing us to a potential major mystery that is revealed by the end of, and it's gonna be Soul. That's the thing. Like, we already know it's gonna be Lee Jung Jae. We know that.
I was gonna say, it's like, it's been so heavy handed in the writing that even like, if this wasn't the real mystery of the show, the other mystery of the show has already been spoiled by the way that they've been like, remember your past, Soul. You shouldn't teach a student without wearing a mask. And then the master's like, well, maybe you should look in the mirror. And then what does Kamir say? Oh, I've accepted my darkness. Have you?
Yeah.
Soul, have you?
It's so
Are
so
you?
heavy-handed and so in your face and so lazy, dude. It's, oh my God. It's so annoying. But yeah, man, I don't know. We're still talking about it. We're gonna keep going.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is there anything else that you want to cover? We covered a lot.
Yeah, I want to apologize if we were just all over the place, but there was so many things to touch on in this episode, just from a lazy writing and execution perspective, I think we gave it its flowers where it needed to. Like the choreography, the fighting was good. Like
Yeah.
I will give it its flowers, but at the end of the day, action is there to accentuate conflict, not be the main story. Like you
Yeah.
can't, the story isn't action. The story is the characters, and that's just not interesting.
I kind of wish that. Now, I will say I'll give flowers one last time before we go off.
Nice.
I think that I'm feeling nice today. I like the concept of having a major force in the Sith be basically the out in the open,
Right.
and kind of having Chimere be there was a cool thing. I thought it was different, especially for Star Wars.
Yep.
What I think they didn't do in an effective way is they made it too obvious,
Right,
that it was him. And I think episode 4 was way too forward with that, because I think some people had thought that it might be him, but by the end of episode 4, I think like 95% were like, it's most likely him.
It's definitely him.
Somebody posted on Twitter, I saw too. I don't know if you saw this.
I don't go on Twitter, thank God.
Okay,
not for this show.
No, and I saw it through Screen Crush.
Okay,
so
gotcha.
it's through Screen Crush.
Gotcha.
One of their staff members tweeted this, and I thought it was very funny, and I agree. I think it was Joanna Anderson. It was a shot of Chimere and Mae when they're on their trek, and he's got this big bag of shit. And it's like, what's in the bag, Chimere? What's in the bag? Haven't seen you lug anything all season.
Yeah.
Now you got this giant bag. Nobody's curious. Mae's not curious. What's in the bag?
Yeah.
It's just all his shit.
Yeah.
To be like, and you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, even something like that, like that's, to me, that's like trying to, it's basically like what you were just saying about Soul, where they're like, you have darkness in you. It's like, see what we're doing? We have it right here for you. If you can't figure it out, there's enough clues that you can figure it out. And it's like, that's not like, I wish I could think of a better word for it. Maybe convenient is the better word, but convenient and lazy is like what I could describe the show as. And that's unfortunate because, as we both said, it's an era that we both have been rooting for. We wanted the show to succeed. We want the show to succeed.
Yeah.
And I just think they've completely dropped the ball.
Yeah.
On this show.
Going back to episode 4, just really quick, one of my favorite Star Wars YouTubers, Thor Skywalker, he's great. Me and him are very much on the same wavelength, but he basically said, like, this episode shouldn't have happened because the minute Mae said that she was going to betray Chimere, there was no reason for him to not just kill her right there in the forest. Like, why get trapped? Why go through all this? Why get trapped? Why then fight all of these Jedi if you don't want to get found by the Jedi? Why reveal yourself? Why not just kill Mae and then leave? Because she's already said she's going to betray you. She said she's going to turn herself into the Jedi, and this guy's a master. Like, just dispatch her then, leave the planet. You're still hidden. You're not out in the open. You're not on the Jedi's watch list, and you don't have to even risk dying to all these Jedi.
Yeah.
So this episode didn't even need to happen, but the show and the plot told us it has to happen.
Very convenient.
Very convenient.
Lazy. I don't know. Well, that's going to do it for us this week as we covered episode 5. What was it called? Night, right?
Night,
Yeah, because episode 4 was day.
Another predictable title.
Another predictable title. So that was it for the episode titled Night for Star Wars The Acolyte. It is on Disney Plus if you do want to watch it, but I'm sure if you're watching this episode, you're aware and you are watching it and you came for our criticism, and we are still not on board with the show despite the fact that this may in fact have been the best episode of the season so far.
It's true.
But that is going to do it for our review. I'm just going to hand it over to Mark to pitch or give you guys his handles for his podcast, and then we'll sign off.
Yeah, thanks, Darian. So, yeah, I have the Star Wars Mark of Balance podcast. You can follow me on Instagram at @star_wars_Mark of Balance. I go a bit more deep into the Star Wars lore, the implications in the Star Wars lore, the canon, and, you know, what feels like Star Wars and what doesn't feel like Star Wars in these episodes, as well as talking about what we talk about, the laziness and the writing and the convenience. So I talk about everything, TV, movies, books, anything in the Star Wars galaxy, I'm talking about it. So would love to have you over there. So thanks for the platform.
Absolutely. And please be sure to follow Mark on Instagram and his podcast. We love what he's doing over there. We're so happy to have him here on the Culture Wave Media Network, which you guys can subscribe below. If you guys can hit that subscribe button, we're on the road to 500 subscribers. We're covering a ton of stuff right now for you guys. We have House of the Dragon, which Mark is going to be on a few episodes upcoming. We have The Boys we're covering right now. Mark and I have been covering The Acolyte. And next week, we're going to be covering the full season 3 of The Bear, on top of a bunch of other movie reviews we have for you guys. The Bike Riders is on there. We have Kinds of Kindness coming, A Quiet Place Day 1, tons of stuff for you guys. So please, if you're a fan of movies and television, please do us a favor, subscribe, like this video if you can, and comment your thoughts on The Acolyte below. Also, you can follow us on social media. We're at Cinema Wave Media and at _Culture Wave Media on Instagram, as well as at Cinema Wave Media on TikTok and Threads, as well as just Culture Wave on Facebook. Just signing off, I am Darian Scalamoni.
I'm Mark Alcabino.
And we'll see you guys next time.
This is The Culture.